Awesome. All right, you want to get started?
Do it.
Cool. All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say thanks, everyone, for joining. Really appreciate you hanging out this morning with us. Excited to chat with Ramy from Glossier this morning. Here is his Twitter and just kind of information if you want to give him a follow. He's awesome to work with and shares a lot on Twitter about kind of everything Figma design and, of course, auto layout. Just want to start off by saying hey and hope everyone who is tuning in is doing well. It's really exciting to see so many people in chat and so many new faces this morning, as well as several familiar faces. So thanks for hanging out again with us. Yeah, if you've tuned in before, welcome back. Just excited to have you. So I think with today's webinar, we're really just gonna get started. And I wanna give Ramy a quick chance to introduce himself, and then we're gonna walk through really just like have a little bit of fun this morning, walk through auto layout examples. We also want to encourage you for those who are in chat, like feel free, we're gonna have a portion maybe a little bit towards the end where like, I think it'd be really cool if anyone in chat has ideas for things for us to build an auto layout, just to kind of show like how we might do it. We're gonna totally struggle on there, but I think it should be a lot of fun. Yeah, just want to encourage you to use chat, and I think we'll also be able to give you the ability to unmute yourself if there's kind of a question you want to ask either Ramy or myself. So I'll stop talking. Ramy, I'd love for you to say a couple words about yourself and yeah.
Sure. So yeah, I'm Ramy. I'm a designer at Glossier. I'm part of our product design team. And just a bit about my background. Grew up in Montreal, in Canada. I started my career in tech as a designer at Square in San Francisco. I worked on products like Order and what became Square e-commerce, and then spent some time at Code Academy as well, where we worked on software or the app where you can learn how to code for free, and then spend some more time after that in real estate technology. So I've been kind of bouncing around a bit in different types of industries and areas of technology, and then now I've been at Glossier for just over a year now, leading design for some of our e-commerce initiatives and also the design systems and things like that, like tooling for designers. So yeah, that's kind of my professional background, and yeah, I'm really excited to get into layout, and I'm very excited that people are interested in hearing us talk about this for an hour.
Yeah, me too. It feels fun to just kind of nerd out. What's your Figma background like? Like, how long have you been using the tool? Were you using it at? Yeah, I'm really curious. Just how long you've been in it and what that looks like.
I was introduced to Figma as my main tool when I started at Glossier, or I think Glossier had just switched over from Sketch when I joined, so maybe just over a year ago or so. Before that, I was using Sketch at my previous company, and before that, I remember that, I don't know if anyone remember those days, but I spent sort of the first few years just doing UI work in Photoshop and kind of using layer comps to set the different frames within the same file and everything. So that was a pretty painful moment for UI design, if anyone remembers that. And then it's really great to have to now have tools where the layout kind of the DUI kind of lays itself out. It's been a big pain point for a long time, and a kind of a big disconnect between the things we actually make and how we work. And so I'm really happy to see that gap slowly decreasing over time with features like that. So yeah, I've been pretty happy with that. Another big thing that we love to use is obviously components and component libraries. Another big win for us in terms of just time savings. Spend less time kind of recreating the same things over and over again, and more time actually designing the products we're working on, which is really cool.
I love that. And then actually one of our first questions came in. Mary Lee, thank you for asking this. And again, anyone else who wants to ask a question, feel free. But she was just curious, of all the industries, what's been your favorites?
Of all the industries, what's my favorite? The real estate tech was really interesting in the sense that it was more kind of systems thinking, or like B2B kind of product design, which I had not been really exposed to before. So that really worked my allow me to exercise my my kind of like systems thinking muscle. I do still have a big crush on Square and everything they're doing. I think there's like I really love just the general mission of sort of empowering small businesses and what that means for the customers. That's something that I'm very much still kind of an idea that I'm very much still in love with. So I think I still have a soft spot for Square as far as my previous jobs, for sure.
I love that. Awesome. Well, cool. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. I would love, if you don't mind, I would love to give you kind of the ability to share. I know you want to walk through a couple of examples, and we'll kind of talk lightheartedly about like what auto layout is for those who haven't used it before, and then we'll definitely get into some examples. And yeah, I'm really excited for this morning.
Sweet. Should I? Do you want to share a screen first, or should I do that?
Oh, what? Go ahead. I'll let you go first.
Alrighty. Okay, so let me.
So maybe first we could talk about like you know, for those who are brand new to auto layout, like Ramy, in your opinion, like how would you describe it? Like what has it been most useful for? And then maybe we can walk through a couple of like really simple examples, and then get into some of the work that you've actually created for Glossier.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe let's kind of start with the basics of what it is and what it's actually used for. So auto layout is a way to set basically constraints and rules on your files and frames and different elements of a design, so that they kind of resize and reposition each in relation to each other automatically. So it very much kind of from my understanding, it tries to mimic kind of what actually happens on a web page, for instance, when the text gets longer, when things move or gets resized and everything. So it's really a way to sort of speed up your workflow and have a better understanding for how things are positioned relative to each other. The most basic example we can look at right now is a button, right? So you have a button will have a label inside of it. So let's make one quickly. It'll be maybe clearer if we show it. So I'll give it a background color. Let's say that green here, maybe some corner radius, and I'll put a label inside of it. Shop now. I don't know.
It's a really good looking button, just gotta say.
Thanks. One of my better ones. So that's what we have. We have this button here. Let's increase this for everybody can see. Okay, so this is how you would typically kind of create a button. You have some kind of shape, or even before this, this is what I would actually do. I would have an actual rectangle shape, and then the button, the label inside of it. Oops. And then that inside is some kind of frame or container. So this is how, in most, like for the longest part of my working career, this is how I would create a button. That's sort of just like a rectangle shape, label on top of it. And then now if my label gets kind of long for some reason, the button basically doesn't follow. So the shape of the rectangle, I'll have to resize manually. And so I'll take that rectangle, but now the label is not centered anymore, so I have to recenter it. And this becomes even more complicated if I have, let's say I have this UI. I'll just set this constraint up quick. Let's say I have this UI where I have two buttons next to each other for some reason. I have a kind of a main primary button. We'll give it a color, nice color here, and I have this kind of secondary button, which is kind of a subdued style. Okay, give it a label color. Okay, so this is what I have now. I have two buttons next to each other, and now let's say my labels are smaller, and I need to resize this. The way I would do it is actually resize the actual shape, but now these buttons basically don't talk to each other. They're completely kind of independent. And so we would basically have to spend a lot of time just resizing stuff and kind of making sure it's aligned. go in here in the pixels and everything. So it's basically a lot of TDM for, and it's a lot of work to make something that's seemingly kind of basic. So what an auto layout does is, if I go back to this button and I have my frame, which has a green fill, and then the label inside of it, you can also use a rectangle, which Figma will convert into, basically remove the rectangle background and apply it to this frame here. So let's say I go here, click on my frame, and add auto layout here. I can also use a shortcut, which is
actually just if it's okay, just to share, like one question I receive a lot is like, kind of why is that happening? So the example there was like, you've got a frame, you have a rectangle layer that's kind of the entire width and height of that frame. And what we do in Figma is as soon as you apply auto layout, that rectangle is like all of the style of that rectangle is converted to the frame, and we remove that rectangle layer. What would happen if we didn't do that is that the text would sit above the rectangle or below, kind of depending on how the auto layout frame was created. And we kind of infer that, if you're doing that, it's very likely that you're just wanting to create either a button or a container, and we're just kind of applying that style. So it can always be changed after, like you can always apply that style from the rectangle to the frame, or kind of change it up on the frame, but just wanted to provide some context there.
Yeah, that's very good context. This is actually something that happened to me when I first started using it. I would apply the auto layout, and then the rectangle disappears, and it's kind of a panic moment.
Totally. So yeah, as soon as you get there, it's like, oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. It actually makes a lot of sense. I like that it simplifies the layers in a way, and I'm always for a kind of simpler layer list to make navigating my work a little easier. So yeah, so what you can do here now is go in the auto layout section and click on this button. And now what it does is it added auto layout. So basically anything that's inside of this frame, and you can see how the little icon has also changed to indicate that auto layout is enabled. Anything that's inside of it will resize itself relative to its parent. So its parent being the frame that's one level above it. So now what happens if I resize my button, or sorry, rename my button, the button will grow with it. And now maybe you want the padding on top and bottom of it to be a bit smaller, or you want this space. This is kind of a large button. It may be unnecessarily large. So all this spacing, this padding is settable here. So spacing between items, since I'd only have one item here, I like to set to 0, just not to get confused. And then this will change the space above and below the text label in this case. And then
Ramy,
this
one quick, sorry to interrupt you, but one thing I wanted to ask, do you mind zooming in just a little bit? If you, I think you should be able to just Command plus, or yeah, on the actual component as well. And we'll kind of walk through the different parts of the UI as well, but I just want to make sure everyone can see.
Is it better?
Yeah, that's a much better view for sure.
Sweet. Yeah, so here I can see that like the padding on either side of the labels may be a bit too much. I don't need that much. So you can go here and change that value. So I'd say I'll do 24, and this is looking more like a button you would kind of expect. You can also, one thing I like to do is if you want to test something quickly, you can click and drag to change those values. And now the third one here that I set to 0 previously is helpful when you have multiple frames inside of, or multiple objects inside of a auto layout frame. So for instance, here, if we go back to our previous example, I'm going to duplicate this by doing Option and drag, or you can copy and paste, but I'd like to use shortcuts as much as I can. And I'll do my label and then my other button. Now I have 2 nice auto layout buttons with different sizes that resize themselves automatically. And let's say now this is button, another button. I like to rename my things to be clean. And now those 2, what you can do is put inside of a frame so that they then have a relationship to each other as it relates to auto layout. So the way I do this is, the quick way is I do Shift A. So I'll select whatever I want to be in that sort of nested auto layout frame. I'll do Shift A, that will put them inside of a new frame. Another way you could do it is just kind of create, a regular frame, and then apply auto layout like we did before. But the shortcut is a bit faster and more precise. So now we have.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. I just want to say, like, this is something that like, once I realized, it's really simple, right? The ability to kind of nest auto layout, in, you know, groups within different auto layout groups. But as soon as I realized that, like, it became a much more powerful feature, especially when you're creating like containers for UI, you know, of course, like grouping these two buttons here. But if you, for example, like we'll get into something where, you know, perhaps you have like a profile photo and some text to the right, all inside of a container, like you can have as many auto layout nested kind of containers as are needed. And I think that's something that really has kind of helped in terms of like creating these like reusable components, which we'll also walk through. But I just want to kind of call that out just because that's like, that's something that really made the feature for me. Definitely a lot still to be desired, but that is something that really kind of drove it forward.
Yeah, I actually, this is definitely one of the bigger strengths of auto layout in my mind, is the ability to nest kind of different frames, auto layout frames infinitely. And with constraints are getting better also, like for things like you can resize, you know, stretch, for instance, a frame inside of another auto layout frame automatically. So it's getting really good, almost to the point where I can definitely see a future where you could create entire sort of automatically laid out page web pages inside of your design tool. And depending on, you know, the content that you change, it'll resize itself. This is like really the kind of future I'm looking forward to. And so yeah, this is a great first step in that regard. And so now that I have my frame of buttons, basically my auto layout frame that contains the two buttons that I have here, that third value here is basically what space will exist between those two items. So now it's 58. Again, a bit too much. I can drag to reset that, or just enter a value. I like my divisible by 8 grid. So there you go. So this is kind of the basics of how it works, and you can see how nesting different things will become really powerful. Let's say
would you want to show like for this buttons situation, like it's a really common component that we're all creating, like you know, perhaps like how to add an icon inside and kind of structure that icon?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll ungroup these for now. And let's say I'll zoom in a bit here. Let's say I have this button here, and I want to put an icon next to it. Let's say we'll add. I have a little library here of our icons. So let's say I want to add a star for some reason. So I have my 16 pixel by 16 pixel star icon. Now I have the label, and I want let's say the star to be on the right side of it. What I'll do here is you can just kind of take your component outside of it and drag it in, and you can see that little it almost looks like a cursor, or that little rectangle here will indicate that it's going to place the whatever you drag it in. So it doesn't need to be a frame. It can be an image. It can be another text label. It can be anything else. Even another button inside of the button if you want to. So you'll just kind of drag it in, and then you'll see now that because it's inside of this frame, it'll automatically kind of reposition itself relative to the other. Oh, count just flew out. The other elements inside of that button. Let's make that white so that it matches the label. And then now we saw before that we were positioning the two kind of buttons relative to each other with this value. You can do the same thing inside of a button. So let's say I want some spacing here between the label and the icon. You can do this the same way. So I go here, select my frame, and then change this value here. So now I have, I'll do 8. And now I have my icon inside of it. One kind of pro tip that I like to use for if you kind of use that in conjunction with components is that, let's say I have my button here, and this is kind of my a component that I have in my component library design system, call it whatever. And then I have an instance of it inside of my so this is, let's pretend it's kind of a component library design that I'm working on. I like to have options inside of my components. So basically, like if you're a developer, the equivalent of that would be kind of like props inside of a React component, for instance. So stuff that you can kind of turn off and on or modify at will. So let's say I have this icon here, but sometimes I want it, sometimes I don't. But I don't necessarily want to have a tons of components with all the different permutations of what's possible. What I'd like to do is I'll leave it on here in the main component, and then in the instance, what you can do is turn it off or on based on whether or not you need it. If your most used scenario is where you most of the time you don't need an icon, but some of the time you do, you can do the opposite, where you can turn it off here, kind of rename it something more generic. This is what I like to do. I like to say option in parentheses, so designers can go in and kind of see what is available for them. And then same thing here. I'll just reset this for now. So now this is, if I dragged it from my component library, this is what I would get. And then if I want to add an icon, I don't need to kind of detach it and add my icon, and then I kind of broke my component, and I won't get the updates if there are updates. So I can turn it on here, and now I have my icon. And then on top of that, if you have multiple, say I saw here, I have like a bunch of different 16 by 16 icons that I can use for different situations. So here, I might not want to use a star. I might want to use a check mark to indicate some kind of, confirmation state or something. I can go in here and change that component to whatever I want it to be. So here I have some UI icons, 16 pixels, and we'll see, say check mark. I can change my icon. And I did that all with the exact same single component that has auto layout in it. So I think we're kind of starting to see how powerful this can get if you use kind of different component libraries, and if you nest things inside of each other in a way that you provide options.
So I was recently using that. I'm really glad you called that out, because like beyond kind of the notion of like being able to group these auto layout kind of containers together, like the ability for a design systems manager to start to create these really complex components from the start. Like for example, let's say, I always think about like a tweet, like in your timeline, right? It's something we're all pretty familiar with. So you have like a profile photo, you have like your name, maybe a verified badge, and then the content below and possibly an image. And it's so cool to be able to create this card that has all of those elements from the start, and then turn those off and allow the designer to take that component and then just simply like turn those layers on when they need them. And then you can kind of like predict and build this component to work for any use case. And you only have to build that component once. Kind of before auto layout, I think many of us were taking all of these like different states, and we were building multiple components to handle each, and then you would have to instance swap. And this is just something that resonated really well with me and a lot of other like design system managers I know.
Totally. One component that we use also quite a bit is, and that's something you probably have as well if you work with a design system or kind of a web apps or anything like that, is kind of a modal component that can show anything inside of it. What I like to do is kind of provide. Here, turn that on. Uh-oh. Okay, my internet's been spotty, so I'm on a hotspot.
No worries, we still got you.
Maybe.
We're all working
I'm
from
actually
home.
shocked that it's still working. Okay, I think this is on. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I have this desktop modal. This is just like a regular modal, but what I'd like to do is provide sample content inside of component, not only as a way for people to like work quickly and figure out kind of and not having to recreate stuff, but also as a way to say, this is how you should generally use this. Basically, this is kind of it's a form of documentation in a way. So basically, I could put here, I have like sample text, but I could also have a sample form. This is how you would lay out a form within this specific grid, because that's how it's been implemented in the code, etc. So that's also like a very, I think, pretty like useful and clever way to use those options inside of components that are turned off by default. It gives people like things to work with and an example as to how they should use something. This is also if you're somebody who publishes, like in the Figma community, for instance, if you publish files and components like that, it's going to be a really good tool to sort of nudge people into how to use a specific element. So that's also a way I like to use. I like to use those.
I love this a lot. So I feel like there's so much we could cover here, and this is really exciting. I wanted to maybe get into possibly like a couple more like um, more complex examples of auto layout. I
Sure.
definitely have some things I would love to show, and I know we got a lot of questions just in terms of like one that I saw that resonated, which I think we'll answer towards the end, is how to basically build kind of like a bulleted list from auto layout. That was something I had worked on a couple of days ago that I can definitely show, and
Yep.
yeah, but I really appreciate you kind of going through the details and kind of the basics of it. I think it's something that like it's for me at least, like I've been using Figma for 5 years, and I was a little afraid to like get into it at first, and now it's like it's a feature that I can't imagine using Figma without. So I yeah definitely really appreciate you kind of showing this example off.
For sure. Maybe should we show the home template?
Say that one more time, Ramy. You broke up just a little
Should
bit.
we show the homepage template?
Yeah, let's do it. That would be great.
Okay. So yeah, so I can show kind of how all of this can manifest itself in real life, and we'll get to the topic of how to use auto layout to make life better, because that was kind of what prompted this in the first place. We have at Glossier, we have obviously the homepage of our website is kind of features. Here we have like a feature of a product. Sometimes it's photos, sometimes it's a video. We have a shot grid, which is what we call the shot grid. So a list of items underneath it. And this hero section, we call it, it changes quite often. And it's the people that work on this are not necessarily part of the design team, or don't have an ability to necessarily change things in code or anything like that. So, and they also want to be able to preview their work. So they want to basically, as in the highest fidelity possible, want to be able to see what the copy is going to look like on the live website, what the assets that they choose are going to look like, and it's very useful for them to be able to do that for, you know, when they're art directing or choosing assets and things like that. A very important part for me of designing is, as much as possible, try and design things in their real context, as opposed to kind of designing things in a silo and kind of hoping that it turns out to be good. A good example here is be able to preview how text wraps on several lines and things like that. So what we built is what we call the sort of a homepage hero template. And this uses auto layout and a combination of auto layout and components for a creative team and their copy team to preview or preview different options and kind of decide which layout they want to use. So for this, we have so there's basically 3 main layouts that they can choose from. I don't know what I just did here. There you go. There's 3 like layouts that they can choose from, depending on, you know, what type of announcement or product you want to feature. Maybe it's a big kind of full page cover to cover image. Maybe it's two up layout, or maybe it's a video like we have now for hand cream. So the way this works is we basically have up here, we have a component that has auto layout enabled and has the button, so the sort of main call to action button, the subtext. I'll zoom in a bit so people can see the main headline, the subtext below it, and the main sort of call to action. And these will resize it automatically. So basically, this is longer. The content beneath it will resize itself. And then the button here is actually, it has auto layout enabled, but it's static on the website. So we give it a set width. So here I deactivated the auto layout for that. The second part of this is it has.
Ramy, sorry to interrupt you, but would you actually mind walking through just that quick example of going from something that has like an auto width compared to a fixed width? I know that's something that I've used pretty often when I build auto layout containers, and I think that might be really helpful to show.
Yeah, for sure. So there's definitely situations where you might not want for the label, for instance, to resize the whole button. And it's like we want the button to be the exact same width as the other element, or even maybe the frame that it's in. So basically, if we kind of recreate this for a second, And thanks for that call out. I think I went a little fast.
Yeah,
there.
of course. Sorry to interrupt you. There's just so much good stuff to talk about
problem.
here.
Yeah. So basically, let's say we have our button here. We'll recreate it really fast. Okay. And we'll give it a background fill. Nope, I don't want background. Inverse, and then this color here. Now I want this to, sorry, I'm like, okay. So now I have more or less kind of the same auto layout thing, and then I'll add same frame, and I'll add auto layout to these. So, okay, now we more or less have the exact same thing, but I want this button here. We'll say this has, we'll add auto layout. Let's pretend it's not full width, so we can see. Okay, so we have this button, and we actually want it to be a fixed width. Like we don't want this to happen where it's going to resize itself automatically. So one way we can do this is underneath the section title, you have different options. So for a button that's growing horizontally, you'll want to set this to vertical, so that here you can select whether the frame will resize itself automatically. So that would be the auto width option, or fixed width, which means you'll be able to, I call this kind of classic mode, where you can set the width manually the same way you would any other frame. So basically here, you can resize this, and it won't affect the label inside of it, and vice versa. If I change the label, if I resize it, or let's say you're working on, there's different languages, you have translations and stuff like that, and you want the width not to change. This is how you would do it. Now, if let's say I want it to be fixed width, but well, not fixed width. I want it to be the width of the container that it's in at all times. So I don't want the relationship to be with the label, but rather its parent frame. So what you can do is up here you have alignment options. So you can say I want this to be aligned in the center, the left, which if we do this, it'll kind of stick to the left. Was that a bug? Did I just see that? I don't know what happened there.
I think it just resized. Yeah, from that text box inside.
Okay.
And just to call out, all of these alignment features are working as the kind of parent container expands or collapses based on the content within.
Yeah. So this is center, right, and left, the same way you kind of would in a Word document or something like that. And then stretch left and right will actually say whatever the width of the parent I'm in, give me that width. And so now let's say we have a layout where the parent frame resizes itself, the button will resize itself with it. So that's kind of how this one is supposed to be set up. Let's say if it affects this down here. Actually, this one is actually kind of a real fixed width, so I'm not going to touch that. But yeah, this is how you would do this. There's multiple options, so you can also do this for text layers. And so if we do this what we did before, sorry, then we'll have the same thing happen with the text layer. And now notice how the height of the frame also resizes itself. So this could be, we were talking about for instance, a layout for a tweet before. Well, obviously, like the content of the tweet will kind of dictate how big or tall a tweet card needs to be. This is a really useful feature for that kind of stuff. It's okay. So now we've set this up. The second part of this is a different asset. So these are basically the assets I want to preview in each of those layout options. So this gives them the ability to say, oh, I want to look at all these next to each other, and really kind of gauge which one is more impactful. Let's say we were to open a new store, and I want to see what that looks like in our auto layout thing. So I'll go into assets here. I have photography bank, a photography library for some of our stores. So let's say we'll do which one is super fun. we'll do Los Angeles. So our LA store is a permanent store, it's already open, but let's say we're opening the LA store, brand new store, very excited about it. Well, what I can do is I'll take any image. In this case, I'll take that one that I have here, and I'll copy, or I can actually also just insert it inside. There's a few ways I can do this. I can insert, basically drag the whatever image inside of this, or what I like to do, because this is already kind of set up, I can copy properties, copy paste, copy properties. I can also do Command Option C and paste them into this one. So basically copying properties will copy things like text, fill, stroke, anything that you've set up here, and paste it onto this other layer. So I'll do Command Option V, or I can also do paste property. It's not working. Okay, let's try that again.
No worries.
Copy
maybe once you're, while you're doing that, I
go.
just wanted to take a moment to answer one question that I saw that came in. So one thing that can be a little bit tricky at first is to kind of understand kind of the general naming and like nomenclature around auto layout. And I saw a question that asked, let's see. So when the option is vertical, kind of the contents inside of that container grow horizontal, or you have the ability to adjust them horizontally. And then when the option is horizontal, you have the option to adjust them vertically. And the reason for that is because everything inside of that auto layout container, when I set it to horizontal, it means that things are going to stack from left to right based on how I've set it, or right to left, or from the center. But I always have the option in Figma to grow that container. And the reason that I can't grow left and right, even though it's set to horizontal, is because we're actually taking all of the children elements inside of that container, allowing those to be expanded or collapsed based on kind of the auto layout properties, but always giving you the user to set, with that parent container that is set to a horizontal grow, like, do I want to grow that vertically, or do I want to have that stay in place? And it's the exact same story if you have something that is set to vertical instead of horizontal. So I hope that helps a little bit. One thing just to say really broadly that I think can really help with auto layout, if you're still a little bit unsure or a little bit intimidated by it, is to just play around, like, maybe not with like components that might affect your entire team library, but with, creating a new button and just like, trying to see like, could I actually take this component that exists in our library now? Maybe I'll bring that in, maybe I'll break it, and let's see if I can actually recreate that using auto layout. And if I can, perhaps I can actually push that back up to the library. That's something that I know that I did pretty early on, just with a couple of components, just to make sure I had an understanding, and also just to ensure that I didn't break anything across. But it really kind of helped me understand the feature as a whole.
Yeah, definitely. And to go back on your previous point about vertical versus horizontal, I think when I showed the example before, we only had, maybe it made less sense immediately because we were only looking at one component, but really what it means is,
yeah,
vertical means the elements inside of that frame are in relation to each other. So basically CTA, in relation to subheader, in relation to the headline, those are laid out vertically inside of there's furniture flying everywhere, inside of the frame. So that's what this actually means. This means the children element of this frame, this is how I want them to be laid out. So exactly. An example here is to make this very, very clear is if I change this to horizontal, now they're laid out sort of next to each other, so horizontally.
Yep, and then you could always adjust the height of those based on that. Awesome.
So I figured out my little hiccup there. So now that I changed the sort of main component asset here, I can see how it's reflected in many different sort of breakpoints. So this allows me to see not only what it looks like at the largest breakpoint, but also like maybe on an iPad tablet, on a phone, and stuff like that. So this is really helpful for to also be able to gauge. Maybe something looks really good at large sizes, but maybe you start to lose some detail at small sizes. So this is really helpful to have, and also goes back to my previous point I made about designing things in their context as much as possible. Being able to preview something in all the different ways, or as many different ways where it's actually going to be represented as much as possible is very, very useful. And it'll also allow you to catch mistakes or things that you might not have if you did everything manually. So big advantage here to setting up tools like that. And let's say I want to kind of compare this with a different layout. So I'll pick two more photos from that store, maybe something more environmental, and maybe a close-up shot of those lip gloss products. So I'll do the same thing here with these. I'll copy properties, paste them in here, copy properties, paste them in here. I can delete those. And now I really have like a nice side-by-side of my art direction. So this is, okay, these are the two options I'm considering. And you can even use this to, if you're working with other people, you can use this as it's a very powerful way to show other people the different options that are presented to them. And let's say the last thing we need here is changing the copy. The way it's set up is that it's actually, I'm going to delete this. The way it's set up is that you change kind of the copy here, and it'll reflect itself on the other artboards like I showed before. But this is nice as a component, but it's a little awkward to kind of update stuff here and go down below and kind of look at it and maybe go back. I'm going to move this for now. So one thing I like to use is the push overrides to master feature, which basically allows you to take any override you do to a component instance and then have that become basically the master. So here, I want to be able to edit this in its context. So new Los Angeles store, woohoo. Okay, wow, this is not the great, not the best layout. New LA store opening, okay? It's not reflecting anywhere else, but you'll see what I mean by pushing override. So we're happy to announce our new store in Los Angeles, okay? And now I'll do, it's not really shop now, so I'll say, I don't know, learn more. Cool. Now I have my real kind of preview that I looked at in context. One thing you can do here is select the instance where you made your modifications or your overrides. And inside of this master and component menu, you have this thing called push overrides to master. And now when I use that, it'll basically edit the main component so that it reflects the changes I made here. And then because I did that, then it'll cascade down to all the other places where it's used as an instance. So keep in mind, if you do this, it'll actually affect every single instance of that. So use that carefully. Maybe not inside like a big library or something.
That's something that I always kind of forget is there, but like if you're working in the design system library and you're taking a component and you're just wanting to see like what happens if I make this small change, like is this something that I want to push out to everyone? I find that I often I'll take that component, I'll break it, but then I have to reintegrate that back into the master component. And that feature is something that, again, I always forget about, but it's so useful because exactly like you were showing, if I make a change, I can always just push that back to the master. And then in one fell swoop, I can just push all of those updates out to the entire team, which is super cool. So I'm glad you called that out.
Definitely. Yeah, it's been really helpful for me. And as much as possible, again, goes back to kind of the importance of designing things in their context. And it really allows you to see the whole picture instead of thinking at the component level is very, it's good in a lot of ways. It's really important to sort of allow modularity and making sure that your design tools are flexible. But then it kind of gives you the best of both worlds in the sense that you can see how things actually look like and still maintain that flexibility.
And I just want to clarify something. I know there's always a little bit of concern of wait, can everyone do that? What does that look like? You can only push the override to the master component if you're in the file with the master component. So it would mean that you would have to have the kind of edit access for that file to begin with. So no one else on the team can accidentally push a change from another file and have that be represented everywhere. It's only kind of you, that component owner or that component editor. So no sweat there. We were very intentional about that.
And to touch on that quickly, let's say this is a photo library that's in a separate file somewhere else. So it's enabled here. I can use it, but this is not the actual file where it lives. Let's say I change the fill, something crazy. I'm just gonna mess stuff up here, okay? All right, there you go. So now I
Looks really
completely
good.
messed it up. Thanks. Actually, it's not bad. I can't do anything with this. The only thing I can do is go to master component, which will open the library, and it can only be edited if you actually have edit rights to do this. So yeah, good call out there. So no sweat. Feel free to experiment with this stuff as well. So yeah, that's kind of how we use the previews, and these I just want to call out also because I think I forgot to mention this. These previews are overrides that match. So basically these frame sizes and everything, they match exactly pixel for pixel what the different breakpoints that we have on our website are. So this is, and because Figma renders things mostly the same way that your web browser does, this is exactly going to represent what users will see in the real context. So again, really hopeful, really useful for catching kind of orphans, you know, or maybe like awkward layouts that are caused by resizing, or maybe certain combination of words are not great. Like we saw earlier that, you know, Los Angeles, or this is kind of weird. Maybe I don't want this to break here, stuff like that. So it's useful for catching the details early on, for sure. So yeah, this is how we use that. And again, auto layout is making that a lot easier to deal with.
This is so cool. Maybe if you don't mind, I have a couple of examples that I wanted to share just from a couple of things that we've worked on at Figma that I can go over, and would love to definitely not end this without showing a quick little like bullet demo of how I might approach something like that. So perhaps I can share my screen real quick. I really appreciate you going over all of those examples. That was super fun to see. And it just like, I feel like every person has kind of a different approach to auto layout and things they use it for or haven't thought of. And honestly, I feel like I could watch a designer use it for hours just because it inspires a lot of ideas. So thank you for sharing all of that. So I wanted to just share a couple of things. I recently worked on, we of course have a design system at Figma, and one thing that I worked on was converting our new type details panel to an auto layout panel. So before this panel, it was a component, but it didn't have auto layout applied. So if a user wanted to take this and, you know, actually just actually I won't demo it just now, but like if you, for example, as many of you know, with you know, different typefaces, you have different options, right? And if a user wanted to like take this component and kind of show like, you know, what happens if perhaps this typeface doesn't have any letter forms, or what happens if we want to actually remove some of these, it wasn't quite possible. So what I did, just to kind of show you how this works, is I created a new component, and I'll just duplicate it. I broke the component just so I can kind of share like exactly how this works. But if I wanted to delete this, and I'll just create a new component, I'll create an instance. And so the idea here is this component would live inside of the design system, and this is an instance that someone on the team would use. And a really cool thing, just like you were kind of detailing at the start, Ramy, was if I go down and I enter in here, I can actually choose to, for example, like let's say I want to hide, maybe I want to hide stylistic sets like 3 through 7. Well, I can just select all of these, and actually one shortcut is you can just press the delete key to hide all of these if you're working with an instance. So it's kind of a cool way, you know, instead of having to press Command Shift H, you can just press delete and it'll totally hide those. If I wanted to bring those back, I could simply just go over and show those as needed. But this was a really cool project to work on just because I thought it's like the perfect case, right? You have like a panel and you have some situations where you might want to show or hide things, and to build this out was quite a bit of fun. And just to show, if anyone's curious, like what this kind of looks like under the layer list. So the entire component itself is an auto layout container. So if I click on this type details component, we can see that auto layout has been applied. It's vertical, so that means that everything is going to stack underneath it. And then if I go in here, just to show a little bit more, I have an options auto layout container. So this, if I hide and show it really quickly, this is everything below. So options is really all of the options for the typeface. Above, I have a preview container, and then finally our header for the entire panel. So I can always have those. These two didn't really make sense to apply auto layout just because they're kind of static and there's no real need to change those, but everything underneath I wanted to make a kind of an auto layout container. And then if I go in, I can show you within this options container, every single one of these main containers in here also has auto layout applied. So you can start to see like really how you can start to nest these. So for example, if I click into our numbers auto layout container, I can click in here and we have yet another auto layout container. And the reason that I did this one is because we have a separator at the top here. And just to show you, if I zoom in here, you can see exactly what the separator looks like. So this separator and then the options panel live inside of an auto layout container. And if I click into options, we're finally done with auto layout containers, but now I can actually click in here and I can hide and show these. One really quick thing is you might be noticing, like as I go in and I hide layers, we actually have a feature in Figma that allows you to, I can click and hold the visibility icon and then simply drag down if I want to enable or hide or show those layers. So that's just kind of a quick little thing that makes life a little bit easier. But I won't go into this too much further, but it was just like that. This was like the perfect case. And this was so fun to make. And it took a little bit of time, but like this really taught me a lot about like the use cases of auto layout. The other thing that I wanted to show is every month we send out a Figma monthly newsletter. And so what we do is we will typically type these up in documents, and then we'll of course like create the assets on the side. And at the end, we'll kind of combine the two, right? But we were thinking, how can we actually, of course, like do this in Figma? How can we work with both the text and the images and the copy it all in one place? And this was such a fun thing to build in auto layout, because what's going on here is myself and those on our marketing team will actually come into a document. They'll edit this master component over here. So this is kind of like the master newsletter component. And on the right side, we have a preview for desktop and then a preview for mobile. And if I drill down into these, we can actually see that we have several auto layout components. But what I've done is I just, I hid the desktop containers and I showed all of the mobile containers. If I do the same thing for this one, if I drill down, we can see that on this one, I simply just hid the mobile containers and I chose to show the desktop containers. And so what this looks like is if I go into the master and I copy some text here, just to show you how all of these change, let's say we update kind of our intro paragraph here. Well, I can paste this a couple of times. So I don't think we'd ever do anything that long, but you can start to see very dramatically how this is all pushed down. We can also do things like if I want, I can grab this headline here. Let me go ahead and undo that, zoom out a little bit. I can of course change this. So hello, everyone. Do something like that. So what's great about this is I'm changing it on the desktop, but I'm also going to grab this text here and I'm going to go to the mobile container and change that here. So I'm changing it all in the single master component. So it's changing over here. And then finally it's changing over here. And just to show you a little bit like what that looks like, I can click on this yellow block here. I can change the fill if I would like. Let's go ahead and make this a different color, and you can see that it's changing for that container. So that's, of course, like kind of components and auto layout combined, but this was such just a fun thing to work on just because, again, I can take any text here. All of the content below is going to be pushed down. I can do that in many different sets, and I can start to build out these just kind of like UI elements or kind of like programs in Figma to actually kind of use and to build these things with. So this, if anyone's actually curious of how this was built, on my community profile, I actually published a public version of this. If you just go to figma.com/@joey, you'll be able to duplicate this for yourself, and maybe it's a good place to kind of get started with an example. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight those two real quick. And then I'll turn it back over to you, Ramy, but one thing I also wanted to show was if we go back to that example over here, I pasted in just a quick little thing of how I might typically do something like the bulleted list. So right here is kind of the ideal situation where we have a, perhaps this could be like, the top list item. It looks like I need to switch this over to, let's go ahead and left align all of this. And so we could do something like that. I could center this here, of course, which probably looks best. But basically what I did is I have a text container here. I have a text container here. I chose to select both of these, and then I applied an auto layout container to both of them. And then what I did is I duplicated this. And so right away, we have an auto layout container over here. We have an auto layout container over here. But I simply grabbed both of these, selected them, made a new auto layout container. Nothing changed really. But what I want to do now is I want to change this from horizontal to vertical. So that's looking a little bit better. And then I want to bring down my gap between to, maybe in this case, I'll do, actually 16 is a little large, let's do 8. So something like this. So now I've got this frame and I have my kind of two nested bulleted list items in here. But the other thing that I can do is, let's say we wanted, you know, this top list item to have a bullet, but this bottom one to kind of be a subset of this. Well, I can simply click in this auto layout frame and I can choose to hide this bullet here. And we can actually do a little bit of work to better align these. So I could select this to the left. That one's good. And now I've got this thing where I can actually choose to kind of grow or shrink these and actually make this into a component. And if I did this, what's also great is I can now duplicate this and I can choose to, you know, of course, in the master component, I could create as many of these as I wanted. And then over here, I could choose to just simply, just like we were doing before, I can grab that visibility icon and hide or show as many as I'd like. So yeah, this is something that it was at least useful for me, and maybe I'm really curious if anyone out there might approach this a little bit differently. But yeah, I just wanted to show that off.
Yep, I do the exact same thing for bullet lists.
Nice.
When I do need them.
Nice. Cool. And then I'll I saw there were a couple of asks there. I'll just paste in my Figma profile link so you can see the newsletter in there if you want to grab that for yourself. Here we go. Awesome. Oh yeah, another great tip in there. You can also just put the bullet point to opacity 0. That way it keeps the alignment. That's also another solution that would work well. I could have also had a container. I could have also created a container. I did that really quick, but I could have also created a container that had a fixed width and then simply just hit that bullet. And then as I kind of changed things inside, it wouldn't grow or shrink like we were seeing. Yep, exactly. Cool. Well, I know we're about at time. I want to be, oh, actually, it looks like we're actually okay. If we want to go a little bit further, I know there are lots of questions, and one thing that I wanted to share is like, there are so many questions in here. And I think one thing that we're going to do is, I'm going to just kind of tweet a lot of like solutions to questions today and just kind of show exactly how you might walk through those. And Ramy, you're welcome to as well.
Yeah.
I think this is pretty fun. It's pretty cool to like create these. So if you're curious, you can definitely follow us both on Twitter to take a look at that. And yeah, it's kind of fun to like build things for people and to see like how we would do it and if your approach is a little bit different as well. But yeah, anything else you wanted to share or get into, or you know, perhaps we could actually look at a couple of questions.
Yeah, I'm happy to do questions. I also have more time if we want to go over or keep going.
Yeah, I don't think there's any worry about going over. So.
Sweet.
Hi, Cal.
Hi. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I am doing well. How are you this morning?
Good. Good. Where's the puppy? Let's see him.
Puppy.
There we go. Azra is she's helping us host questions for these calls. So cool. Ramy, anything you wanted to cover, or maybe we could take a look at a couple of questions if you want to do. I know it's always kind of fun to do some live examples, but perhaps we could actually, yeah, do we just want to hear about Azra's puppy? Or we could go through some questions as well.
Yeah, let's do questions.
Cool.
Okay.
So let me go through. I've got a couple of here. Let's see. Oh, I know there were lots of, Ramy, have you ever created a table using auto layout? I know it's something that's not 100% possible right now just because of, you know, if you go by rows, you might push things off a little bit. If you go by columns, you might not always be able to align things, but I'm curious if you have any like light examples or things that you've kind of run into there.
Yeah, maybe we can do a little live jam session on that. So we'll do, let's get a new file here. So I'm assuming what you mean here is kind of a sort of typical, you know, admin UI type of like a list of rows with content inside of it with separated by columns, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I feel like this is something we always like try to create, or that we always create. So I'm curious if you have any tips on actually doing that.
Sure. Actually, let's try and like make one live and talk through it as we go, because I think it'll be easier for me to kind of go through it. Okay, so this is how maybe I would try and do it. Usually I think of tables in terms of rows, just because there's a row is like, for me in my mind, is kind of like the most kind of atomic element of a table. So let's try that. We'll do row. I like to rename my layers as I go. So we'll do row.
Usually can't work if there's any unnamed layers.
Yeah, I'll have a, let's say I want this to be 48 points high. I'll usually have some kind of divider. A trick I've been using for many years even back from the Photoshop days, if I need a bottom or top divider, I'll use the drop shadow for that. So I'll set the blur to 0, Y position to 1, and then kind of set whatever opacity I want. The one thing to keep in mind with Figma is that sometimes they'll have clip content enabled, so you'll need to deactivate that to actually see the drop shadow. Another thing here is it's still not showing up is because we don't have a background fill. So for that to show up, we'll need to have a background fill. So I'll just do white for now. And now we have kind of our cell with our divider at the bottom. We'll create a component for this so that I can kind of modify it as I wish. I'll create a few rows. So you'll see the command on the screen here. I duplicate the whatever element I want, either on top or bottom, and then hitting Command D. Now you Control D on Windows. Hitting Command D will duplicate it with the same amount of space that you first set it with. So if I do that and then duplicate it again, it'll just kind of go crazy like that. So now I have all my rows. Now you can see that I only have one divider here. So what I do is, if I'm going to enable here auto layout, I'll set the spacing between to 1 so that my drop shadow is visible. And the reason for that is because the drop shadow is actually outside of the frame, so it'll actually, because it's casting a shadow outside of your element. Joey, do you know if there's I guess you could use inner shadow for that. Let's try it. See, this is how I work. I kind of go in 60 directions at the same time. Let's do inner shadow, try this for fun. Y -1. I think this actually works. So if I go back to my group of rows and
sorry, I realized I was on mute, but I think this is an awesome way to do it. Like, I'm a person who always create like a 1 pixel divider, but I've started to use drop shadows a little bit more just because they're a little bit easier to work with, especially in the context of auto layout. So this is cool to see.
Yeah, I find them easier to manage. The only drawback is that if you work with other people, you need to let them know that you're doing that, because sometimes we'll be looking for a line or a rectangle in the layer list, and they're like, well, what's going on? I don't know where's this thing. So again, I kind of have to give people a heads up. I think in my experience, it's not a traditional way, or at least most people don't work this way. So yeah, just make sure people know. Looks like the inner shadow trick works. So that actually solves our problem of the one pixel divider thing. So now we have a bunch of rows, and now we're going to probably want like a few columns. So let's say we'll have something like, we'll just name them, name, date, I don't know, like a description. Let's say, I don't know what this table is for exactly, but let's pretend. And I'll copy these and put them inside of my main master component. Nice. So that now it's all kind of inside of it. I'll change the font because I want to. I'll do SF compact text. Whoops.
Ramy, you're like the Bob Ross of auto layout right now. This is super fun to watch. I was actually just working on a table example a couple of days ago, and it's fun to see how you're setting this up.
Let's do rounded because it's a little more fun. Okay, I don't know if what's going on here. There we go, it's just taking them off. Okay, so now I have sort of the master component, the headers, and the different rows. And let's say I want, what are we doing? Are we like trying to have these auto layout, like laid out automatically horizontally?
I think it depends, right? Like, I think, whether we want to like kind of expand each row vertically as content comes in, or if we want to go left or right. Like, I know there are a couple of different solutions, and right now it seems like we're on track to like expand the rows kind of vertically based on what's inside.
Okay, let's try to do that. So basically what I want is, if this gets kind of long, I want the row to expand vertically. Okay, I have to think about that for a sec. Okay, so what I'll do is put these 3 labels inside of an auto layout frame for now. I'll call this text labels. And then this one, so this has auto layout. Does it not? No, it doesn't. Do that first. Add auto layout. Okay. Now I have my labels. And one way I tend to think about whether or not I want to add auto layout is if I have two elements that have a specific spacing or a specific relationship to each other, I'll add auto layout to that. So I'll usually end up with a bunch of nested frames, but that's fine because this, if you want to really be really specific with the spacing and kind of lining everything up to a grid, you might have to kind of add a few more nested frames. But that's fine as long as you kind of understand your own way to work and you're not getting lost in your own stuff. It's fine to nest stuff as much as possible, as you want. Okay, so now we have my 3 labels inside of an auto layout frame. Let's see. I probably want to add a specific auto layout frame for description because I want this one to be the one that kind of resizes the row. So I'll add a layout here. I'll do Shift A. Now it kind of assumed a bunch of stuff here in terms of spacing, so I'll just reset this so I can control it. Okay, let's see. Oh, this is set to horizontal, which means it'll grow horizontally, but I want this to be kind of a fixed width, so it'll wrap after a few words.
Right.
I'll set this one here inside of description layout. Inside of that to be left aligned, and then, okay, let's try this out. What happens now? There we go. So now What happens here is that we have this one here, kind of, because it's inside of another auto layout frame, it's resizing itself and the container it's in. Now maybe I don't want these two to be centered. I want them to be kind of at the same baseline as the first line of description. So we might just be able to do this here. Yep, there we go. And because I like my typography to be really tight, I'll show rulers. And just for a sec, I want to make sure we have the exact same baseline here. Yeah, there we go.
I'm glad we work the same way.
Actually, rules, I use rules as like temporary things because I don't like to see red lines everywhere all the time. But they're really useful for quick alignments and stuff like that. Doing this for now. This is not really useful. Yeah, so that's kind of how I would do it. I think this works. Now, what happens if I resize this? Yeah, I think this becomes one of the constraints of you can either choose to resize things vertically or horizontally. There's probably a way for this to work, but I would need to spend some time kind of banging my head against this to try to figure it out.
And that's like, at first that's kind of like the intimidating part, but it's also kind of the fun part of using auto layout, just trying to decide exactly what you can build and trying to make this. And this is super impressive. Like, I was working on an example the other day, and what I did is I chose to make like a single kind of like table cell component, and then I just duplicated that everywhere. But I ran into the problem which you solved, where when I was expanding or collapsing based on the content that was inside, I wasn't successfully able to kind of push all of the other contents to the left or right. So this is awesome. Ramy, would you be open to maybe sharing this in community, just if others want to grab it, and we can share that link later?
Yeah, I'll keep it around.
Okay, awesome.
Should I publish it now or?
I can help you after, and we'll share that link. I can share it on my own Twitter if anyone's curious.
Sweet. There's also a really good, I saw recently, there's a pretty has all kinds of different table layouts. Find in the community, it has different components that set it up kind of vertically or horizontally with rows, but also by columns. There's a bunch of different ways that also were helpful for me to understand how like other people work, which is
awesome.
Really cool. One
thing just really quickly that I wanted to share, if you don't mind if I take over the screen, and then we might wrap up. And as I said, like I know there were so many questions that came in. If you want to just send them either to Ramy or myself on Twitter, like I can definitely spend a little bit of the day today just trying to make those and share those out. And again, would love to like know how everyone else is kind of approaching that. But let me go ahead and share. I just wanted to kind of highlight a really simple feature that I use pretty often. So again, really quickly, and my text is nowhere as aligned or great as Ramy's, but I created a quick little frame here. And one thing that we do in Figma is, because this is an auto layout frame, I'm actually able to click on any layer in here and use the up or down arrows over here on the right-hand side, or simply just move this layer through the layer list to actually change the position really easily. And this is, again, a really simple example, but if you're wanting to work with things where, perhaps in some instances you want to change that kind of ordering, or if you're just kind of experimenting around, perhaps like, what would it look like if the image were below and the name were above, or if I wanted to, completely remove this text. I think that's something that can be really helpful, that just wasn't totally obvious at first, just kind of given everything else that auto layout encompasses, but I just wanted to just share that really small thing.
Yeah, that's good tip.
Awesome. Well, Ramy, thank you so much for joining us this morning. This was super fun to watch you. And like I said, I feel like I could tune in just to a stream of you kind of building components forever. But we'll share all of this out, including the recording and any assets that we can share as well. And yeah, if you have any questions, definitely let us know. I think building things like this is really fun, and just really grateful for your time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's been really great. And yeah, let's take I can take the questions to Twitter also. There's a bunch that are really good that we couldn't get to, but
yeah. Do you want to, before we log off, do you want to just share your handle in the Zoom chat, just in case people aren't sure where to follow you?
Absolutely. Here we go.
Cool. It was so fun to see everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Definitely stay safe, everyone. And we appreciate you just kind of spending your morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are with us. And we have a lot more of these. If you're looking for more, you can always go to figma.com/events. But yeah, Ramy, thank you again. It was super good to see you. And we're just really appreciative of your time. And yeah, thanks for all you do.
I'm happy to be back whenever.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next time.
See ya.